Welcome to the Nation of History channel. Be sure to subscribe and like so you don't miss out on more videos like this one.
Charles Goodnight, an emblematic figure of the Old West, first stood out as a Mustanger, capturing and training Mustangs across the vast plains between Texas and Wyoming during the 19th century. These activities were essential at a time when millions of wild horses still roamed open lands, providing a valuable source of income for professionals who mastered capture techniques such as corridor traps and the controversial maneuver known as creasing. This method required extreme precision and could seriously harm the animals when done incorrectly. Goodnight turned this occupation into a starting point for his fame before becoming one of the pioneers of regional cattle ranching. The introduction of barbed wire in the 1880s and 1890s restricted grazing areas and caused the decline of the herds, gradually making both free Mustangs and the profession of Mustanger disappear. This occupation marked an era of challenges and myths tied to the expansion of the American West. James Kirker became an emblematic and controversial figure of the Old West between the 1830s and 1870s by leading a group of mercenaries hired to pursue Apache warriors. Born in Ireland and first working as a ragman, Kirker entered a bounty system in which Mexican state governments, such as those of Chihuahua and Sonora, offered payments that could reach 200 pesos for presenting proof of each action carried out. This practice, driven by intense conflicts among Apache groups, Mexican authorities, and settlers, caused serious consequences and encouraged many abuses. Without strict oversight, some participants even presented evidence connected to Mexican or American civilians in order to receive payment. Despite strong public rejection of the activity, the business prospered because of government demand until the decline of indigenous conflicts and the creation of reservations made these operations obsolete and politically unacceptable in the American Southwest. In the late 19th century, establishments associated with the use of a poppy-derived substance grew in the American Old West, especially in San Francisco and Denver, alongside the arrival of Chinese workers involved in building the Transcontinental Railroad. In these places, customers paid between 25 cents and $2 to stay in booths equipped with specific utensils, kerosene lamps, and mattresses. Often set up behind Chinese laundries or tea shops to avoid inspection, these spaces also received white middle-class Americans, including women, revealing a social phenomenon that crossed ethnic boundaries. The substance, then legal and available in pharmacies as a medicinal product, gradually became linked by the press to addiction problems. Local repression began in the 1880s and culminated in a federal law of 1914 that established greater control over this type of product. The period represents a complex chapter in American history, involving immigration, public health, legislation, and prejudice. In the 1860s, buffalo tongue was considered a luxury delicacy in restaurants in the eastern United States and Europe, making the job of tongue salter one of the most profitable and least remembered occupations on the American frontier. While much of the animals taken from the plains was not fully used, the tongue received special attention and was salted right in the field to keep it from spoiling, especially during the summer. This work required speed and skill, since hunting parties could process dozens of buffalo in a single day, and the salter had to preserve the product so it would reach distant markets in good condition. Kansas City became the main export center, sending hundreds of thousands of tongues each year through the rivers and railroads that crossed the country. The success of this trade reveals lesser-known sides of the economy and culture of the period, when demand for specific animal parts created new jobs and expanded the movement of goods in 19th century America. The nighttime sanitation worker, known as the night soil man, played a key role in organizing towns of the American Old West between the late 19th century and the early 20th century, especially in places such as Dodge City and San Francisco. In a setting of poor infrastructure, these workers removed accumulated material from sanitation facilities during the early morning hours, carrying buckets and barrels in covered wagons through empty streets before sunrise. The service was done at night to reduce the discomfort caused by high temperatures and also to keep it discreet, since the task was socially looked down upon. The collected material could be reused as fertilizer by farmers, making it a profitable and necessary activity for reducing public health problems that threatened the boomtowns of the time. In some towns, organized companies received exclusive contracts to carry out this little seen but essential work for maintaining hygiene and urban livability. After the drastic reduction of buffalo herds on the Great Plains in the 1870s and 1880s, large amounts of bones remained scattered across the prairies, creating an economic opportunity for pioneers. Men and families collected this material on foot or in wagons, selling it to industries in the East, where it was turned into fertilizer, bone charcoal for sugar refineries, and buttons. Between 1872 and 1874, in Kansas alone, more than 100 million pounds of bones were collected, showing the scale of this activity. For newly arrived families with few resources, this was often their first source of income, although it involved hard labor amid the changing local ecosystem. The disappearance of the great herds became part of an economy adapting to the social and environmental changes caused by the expansion of the United States in the 19th century. Life on the prairies symbolizes a complex chapter in the history of the Great Plains, where survival depended on using the remains left behind by a species essential to indigenous culture and to the natural balance of the region. In mining camps from the Klondike to Colorado, the professional hygiene worker emerged to deal with serious sanitation problems in the late 19th century and the early 20th century. A shortage of water and lack of soap encouraged the spread of small unwanted pests among miners, clothing, and animals. The worker used fine combs and cleaning solutions available at the time, while more difficult cases could require cutting hair and applying sanitary products then considered appropriate. The job also included caring for animals used by pioneer groups, reducing the transfer of these pests between camps. In some communities, passing a hygiene inspection before entering certain establishments was one of the few effective ways to keep the problem from spreading. This little-known activity became an important part of the daily struggle for order and survival in isolated mining environments. In the final years of the 19th century, farmers on the Great Plains faced problems caused by huge prairie dog colonies, which affected horses, crops, and grazing land, reducing the productivity of rural properties. This led to the work of specialized prairie dog controllers hired to reduce colonies that could stretch across thousands of square miles, as happened in Texas in 1901, when one colony covered about 25,100 square miles and contained around 400 million animals. The methods used included corn treated with chemicals and fumigation procedures applied at the entrances to burrows, strategies that required weeks of work and large amounts of materials. These workers were often nomadic, hired by ranchers and local authorities as they followed the advance of the agricultural frontier. The activity reflected the conflicts between economic development and environmental preservation that marked the period, showing the solutions adopted as rural properties expanded westward across the United States. On the frozen plains of Dakota, Nebraska, and Minnesota, during 19th century winters, blizzards could turn into horizontal snowstorms capable of reducing visibility to almost zero in just a few minutes. Between 1880 and 1890, these events often isolated farmers on their properties. To keep residents from getting lost or staying exposed to extreme cold, the so-called blizzard rope appeared, a line connected from houses to barns and wells that showed a safe path during windstorms. The rope keeper installed, checked, and repaired the system to keep it firm and within reach, even when residents wore thick gloves. In larger communities, this role could be assigned to an employee. In smaller ones, it was shared among residents. Documents from the period describe cases of settlers who lost their sense of direction when they could not find the rope. In this way, this simple resource symbolized the line between safety and danger on the northern prairies of the United States. At the height of the California gold rush in the 1850s, rats were a threat to mining towns and ports of the Old West, destroying supplies and spreading disease. To fight this problem, a profitable activity emerged: the large-scale import of cats. These animals, known for controlling rodents, were bought in cities in the eastern United States and Europe, then transported in cages by ships and stagecoaches to centers such as San Francisco and markets in Alaska. The cats were sold for prices between $10 and $50, equal to weeks of a miner's wages, showing their economic importance. Entire ships unloaded lots for this market, where bakery, hotel, and warehouse owners competed for the healthiest animals in dockside auctions, creating a trade that mixed sanitation needs, urban expansion, and financial opportunity in that setting of social and economic transformation. In the 19th century, across the wide territory of the American Old West, and in the remote mining towns of Alaska and the Yukon, bear grease stood out as a valuable and multi-purpose resource. Before industrial creams and petroleum jelly became common, this natural product was sought for many uses, from preserving equipment and hinges to protection against severe cold and traditional care for skin irritation. Specialized merchants, many of them connected to hunting activities in the region, used fat obtained during the fall when the animals had larger natural reserves, producing between about 5 and 13 gallons from each bear. The product was sold in small jars with attractive labels that promised to soften leather, protect surfaces, and even support hair growth, although not every formula contained real bear grease. In this informal economy, the product sometimes became more valuable than many local foods, highlighting its important role in daily life and in how communities adapted to cold North American regions. At the height of mining towns in the 19th century and the early 20th century, the gold dustware played an essential role in the local economy, where there were not enough bills or coins for daily transactions. Using a precision scale called a troy scale and certified weights, this professional measured small amounts of gold dust, sold in grains or eighths, to make sure purchases were fair. The process was done in front of the customer, who watched the weighing and the return of any excess, which was necessary in an atmosphere of distrust and fraud accusations. In some cases, weighers used tricks such as wetting their fingers to catch grains of gold, a practice fought by audits in more organized towns. This role, based on absolute trust, disappeared with the introduction of federal currency, marking the end of an economy based on powdered precious metals and the transition to the modern monetary system. The Texas fence-cutting wars between 1883 and 1884 were a conflict between large ranchers who marked off land with barbed wire and small producers who depended on shared grazing land. The fence cutters acted at night, cutting wires to guarantee access to the land. Groups such as the Javelinas and the Blue Devils, formed by medium-sized farmers and local communities, saw the fences as a prison that limited their herds. In November 1883, the governor banned fence cutting, with penalties of up to 5 years in prison, but the resistance lasted more than a year. The losses to large landowners are estimated to have reached $20 million, revealing a rural dispute that challenges traditional stories of the Old West. These wars show a complex chapter in the struggle for land and social justice in 19th century Texas. In the late 1870s, barbed wire revolutionized the American Old West, changing how farmers protected land and herds. At first viewed with distrust, this metal product with sharp points was sold by representatives of the Washburn and Moen Company, who traveled through Texas, Kansas, and Nebraska, often bringing aggressive bulls to demonstrate its effectiveness. Before barbed wire, wooden or stone fences were expensive and impractical, but the new material was cheap, durable, and efficient, making cattle control easier and ending the era of the open range. American production jumped from about 22,000 pounds in 1874 to more than 88 million pounds in 1880, causing a reorganization of rural properties and the end of territorial disputes known as fence wars. All of this began with the courage of salesmen carrying rolls of wire in their wagons, convincing resistant communities to adopt this innovation that shaped the American West. In the 19th century, during the expansion across the American Old West, the maker of wagon wheel grease played an essential role in the success of caravans crossing the Great Plains along the Oregon Trail. This handmade grease was produced from beef tallow or pork lard, combined with pine pitch, coal tar, or quicklime, adapting to the local climate to protect wooden or iron axles from wear caused by friction. Proper lubrication prevented axles from jamming, warping, or even catching fire, which could cause delays or disasters on long journeys. Sold alongside basic supplies, the grease was an indispensable item for keeping wagons moving westward, valued for its secret formulas, and sold at a premium price. The profession disappeared with the arrival of oil-lubricated metal axles, but while it existed, it helped keep moving the migrations that shaped the history of the United States. Before mechanical refrigeration, ice cutting was an essential and physically demanding activity in hot towns of the United States Old West, where ice was valued for preserving food and cooling drinks in saloons. Cutters used hand saws to remove blocks from frozen rivers and lakes, usually measuring about 2 by 3 feet and weighing up to 330 pounds. The work required precision, strength, and constant attention, since slips, changes in the surface, and exposure to extremely cold water could interrupt the operation. After being cut, the ice was stored in insulated warehouses with sawdust or straw, allowing it to last for several months. Specialized companies controlled the supply and charged high prices, reflecting how rare the product was during the summer. With the arrival of mechanical refrigerators in the early 20th century, this production disappeared in less than a generation, radically changing how ice was made and distributed. The Oklahoma Land Rush on April 22, 1889, was one of the most emblematic episodes of American expansion in the 19th century, when thousands sought 160 acres to call their own. The Sooner represents those who broke the rules and crossed the official line before the noon gunshot to secure the best lots, in a practice that went beyond greed and came close to a game of territorial spying. Many of these secret claim markers, such as the man mounted on horseback with his stake, were hired to map and mark the most promising lands in advance, facing the risk of prosecution and removal. Despite the controversy, the episode reflects the social and economic complexity of settlement, where opportunism and courage mixed with tensions between pioneers and authorities. The term Sooner lived on as a cultural symbol, naming the state and its university while recalling the boldness of that moment. In the 1840s and 1850s, leading a wagon caravan across the Great Plains of the United States was a job for specialists called bull whackers, whose skill with leather whips could determine the success of the journey. Masters at guiding between 12 and 16 oxen, they used whips up to about 20 feet long with beaver hide tips, not to beat the animals, but to make sharp cracks that guided them with precision, sometimes even cutting a man's cigar without touching his skin. Each expedition along the Santa Fe Trail lasted 3 to 6 months, covering about 2,000 miles while facing dust, mud, rivers, and insects. Rarely mounted, bull whackers walked alongside the oxen, enduring harsh conditions that made the job one of the hardest in the Old West. In towns, the most experienced drivers earned respect and symbolized the strength needed to cross wild territories. Faro was one of the most popular card games in the Old West, surpassing even poker and blackjack in many saloons in Arizona, Montana, and Wichita during the 19th century and the early 20th century. The person in charge of the faro table was a central figure at these gatherings, needing great skill to control the dealing box, deal the cards one by one, and track complex choices on a metal board while following the decisions of several players at the same time. It was a valued occupation, and experienced professionals often earned more than the owners of the establishments on busy nights. Wyatt Earp, who would later become a famous lawman, and Doc Holliday worked at faro tables before entering history as figures of the West, showing the social and economic importance of the activity. With the decline of the game in the 20th century, the profession nearly disappeared, leaving behind a striking chapter in the culture of saloons in American frontier towns. The rodeo clown appeared in the 1880s as a key figure for competitor safety in North American rural shows that were quickly becoming professionalized. Despite the funny appearance, the main job was to draw the attention of bulls that could weigh about 1,760 pounds, protecting cowboys who had come off their mounts and were still in the arena. The colorful costume and exaggerated makeup not only entertained the crowd, but also helped direct the animal's movement and gave competitors time to reach a protected area. This worker had to be quick, alert, and brave, facing extremely demanding situations to help participants. Over the years, the role expanded to include comedy performances between events, although the protective mission remained its central purpose. The activity shows how entertainment, physical skill, and safety came together in rodeo arenas. In the 1870s and 1880s, the American Old West faced the challenge of identifying wanted people without modern resources, making photography a fundamental tool for recording individuals located by authorities and documenting the results of investigations. Traveling photographers crossed towns and prairies while following news of law enforcement operations, carrying portable laboratories and wagons to perform the delicate wet plate collodion process, which required preparing, photographing, and developing a glass plate in up to 10 minutes. Among the best-known images is the only confirmed photograph of Billy the Kid, produced in Fort Sumner and dated to 1879 or 1880. These images were sold at affordable prices to the public and to Western show companies, being reproduced in hundreds of copies. Demand provided enough income to support long journeys across the territory, while turning photography into an important tool for identification and documentation of law enforcement activities. The Pinkerton National Detective Agency, founded in 1850 by Allan Pinkerton in Chicago, played an important role in the American Old West, where the absence of federal authority made control difficult. Its agents, famous for disguises, infiltrations, and pursuits, were hired by railroads and banks to protect property and capture criminals, including the hunt for Butch Cassidy, followed for months in Wyoming. The agency's symbol, an open eye with the motto, "We never sleep," inspired the term private eye for a private detective, reflecting constant watchfulness. However, its reputation was mixed, because besides maintaining order, the Pinkertons were used by industrial elites to suppress strikes, bringing contempt from workers and criminals alike. This duality marks the history of the Pinkertons in the 19th century and early 20th century in the United States. Francis Asbury was a central figure in the rise of Methodism in the United States in the 19th century, known as the father of American Methodism and a pioneer of the traveling preachers called circuit riders. These preachers crossed vast rural territories, covering circuits of 300 to 500 miles on horseback, bringing religious messages to distant communities without permanent pastors. Living in harsh conditions, often sleeping on the ground and eating what believers offered, they earned salaries below $100 while facing diseases such as malaria, pneumonia, and physical exhaustion. Their life expectancy was short, around 5 years after ordination, showing the sacrifices of the mission. Beyond religious messages, circuit riders were valuable sources of news and social contact for isolated families, making them essential to the social unity of these communities. The influence of Asbury and his followers shaped the expansion of Methodism and the religious presence in the American interior.
If you enjoyed this video and want to support the channel, Please use the Super Thanks tool below. Your contribution helps us keep bringing you amazing historical content. Thank you so much for your support, and see you in the next video.